In this tutorial, we're going to build a to-do app using Marko and the upcoming Tags API, which is currently in preview. This to-do app will allow us to add items. We can check them all. We can filter to what still needs to be done or what's already been done. We can clear the ones that are completed and delete things if we don't need to do it anymore. The To-Do app we're building is a part of To-Do MVC, which is a project that provides a specification for building a To-Do app in a consistent way so it can be implemented in multiple different frameworks and languages, and those implementations can be compared. So we're going to start from their template, and that means that this tutorial is going to assume a base level of HTML and CSS knowledge. We're just going to start with the base HTML provided by To-Do MVC, and we're going to paste that into Marko's online editor. So you can see here, we've got just a basic HTML view, and it's rendering over here on the side. Marko is actually near superset of HTML, which means that we can just paste in this HTML and it will, for the most part, work. Now you see we've got an error here. It cannot find this CSS file that's being referenced. Marko's a little bit more strict than HTML is. Browsers typically would just render this and the CSS would be missing because it can't be found. Marko actually provides an error when things like that happen. The reason that this can't be found is because this is coming from an NPM module. To resolve that, since we're using this in browser editor, we're going to replace that node modules path with unpackage, which is a global CDN that just serves files from NPM. So we're going to come here, we're going to replace these node modules with unpackage, and we're going to delete these unused CSS and JavaScript files. So we have our base template here. Let's take a look at this template to see what we have to work with. There are some comments in here that are providing some instruction about what we need to do to actually implement the to-do app behavior. And so we see this section should be hidden by default and shown when there are to-dos. The same goes for the footer. We also have some example to-do items in here. This first one we see is marked as completed. The second one is not. This comment says that items should get the class of editing when they're editing and completed when they're marked as completed. So let's see what happens if we get rid of this. That line through the item goes away. We add it back, line comes back. We change the editing. We're now in this edit mode and this input here is visible. So that gives us a little bit to start working with. So let's start by seeing if we can get this driven by some Marko logic. We're going to add a const completed, and we're going to set that equal to false initially. So we're going to add a class here. So completed will be set when completed is true, and then check will also be set when completed is true. So now we should be able to switch this to true, and it both becomes checked and marked out. We change it back to false, and it's false. Let's go ahead and add an editing as well. And we'll come here and add that as a class here. So now we're not editing. Now we are editing. That all looks good. All right, now that we have these values powering a single to-do item, let's switch this to use a value that's controlling the entire list. So I'm going to change this completed variable to a to-dos variable, and we're going to make this an array. And inside the array, we'll add some objects to represent our to-dos. So we'll say text first, and it'll also have a completed property. And we'll set that to true for this first one. We will copy that. Second, make this one false. That one's not completed. And we'll add a third one. And we'll leave that not completed as well. All right, so let's get rid of this extra list item. So we've got an error over here. Completed is no longer there. So let's fix that by iterating over our to-dos. So for each to-do of to-dos, we will render this. And so this completed property now needs to be set to to-do.completed, and same for checked. And we'll go ahead and update this label as well. To.text. All right, so we've got our 3 to-do items in here. The first one is marked as completed. Now, this list of to-dos is not the only thing in this application that is actually driven by the to-do data. We also remember this section here that contains the to-dos should be entirely hidden if there are no to-dos. And the same goes for the footer. So let's make that happen. We're going to hoist the to-do data. We'll hoist it all the way up here to the top inside the body so that this data is now available everywhere. And we will put these sections inside an if. So if todos.length, then we'll show this section. So far, looks exactly the same as we expect, but if we get rid of these to-dos, now we only see the input field to add a new to-do, which is exactly what we want. Let's go back ahead and add back these dummy to-dos for now. Let's remove these comments that we've already completed. And next up, let's update the footer count of the remaining items. So to do that, we're going to create another variable, and we'll call this active to-dos. And we'll set that equal to the to-dos filtered to those that are not completed. So now we come down here, set this to active to-dos length, which is the number that are still remaining. And then we want to pluralize items when necessary. So let's also make this dynamic. So if the length is 1, then we will make this item, and otherwise it'll be items. Now we got 2 items left. We come here and set this to true. Now it says 1 item left. All right, so that one's done. And let's come down here to look at clear completed. So we want to hide this button if there are no completed items left. And we can just calculate that in line. So we're going to set this if equal to if to-dos dot length is greater than the active to-dos dot length. That means there's some completed items. So we have less active to-dos than the entire to-do list. Oops. So if we come up here and we mark this last one as, actually reverse of that, if we mark these 2 as not completed, then that should go away. Now that we have a completed item, it comes back. Let's come back down here and remove this comment. We are now hiding that if there's no completed to-dos. And we're also going to remove this section, but we're not going to implement the routing in this tutorial. So you can implement that on your own if you would like to. We're also just going to clear out some of this and just leave the double-clicked edited to-do instructions in this info footer. So now we're at a point where all the data is coming into our to-do application and being displayed correctly, but we need to actually be able to use the application and modify this data. Let's make it so we can mark some of these to-dos as completed or not completed. If you look here, we do have these inputs and we can check and uncheck these, but it doesn't change the class on the to-do item, so we don't get that nice crossed out style, nor does it update the remaining items in the footer. So when we're checking these and unchecking these, we need to reflect that data back to our to-dos array so that it can propagate through the rest of the UI that we've set up here. I'm just going to reformat this here quickly, and then we're going to add a change handler so we can react to the change of these inputs. So inside this change handler, we need to update the to-dos array. And so we're going to set the new to-dos equal to an array, a copy of the to-dos array. And then we're going to come here and get the current index, and we're going to overwrite that index. So new to-dos index is equal to our, I'm going to create a new to-do that's based on our current to-do. And we're going to set completed to the inverse of what our to-do was. And then we're going to set that back. We're going to set to-dos equal to our new to-dos. And maybe updated to-dos is a better name. Not really adding. They're not like completely different to-dos. We're just updating that one. So we have an error over here. Reference is a constant and cannot be defined. And so that's letting us know that we actually can't assign to this to-dos value because it was defined as a const. So we're going to switch that over to let, and now we're able to assign to it. And let's see if this works. Yep. So check, uncheck, and got one item left, got 0 items left, and we're getting that nice crossed out style now when we're checking these off. While we're at it, let's make the toggle all checkbox actually toggle these all complete or incomplete. So this arrow right here is that checkbox. And if we click that, nothing's happening right now. So how do we know when everything is complete or incomplete? Because we do need to know that to have the correct checked value on this box and also know which way we should be toggling things. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new value here, and we'll call this all complete. And everything would be complete if we have no active to-dos left. So we'll set this equal to active to-dos, that length negated. So now we can come here, set check equal to all complete. And I'm going to move these on to separate lines because just added a new attribute and we're about to add one more. We're going to add on change handler similar to before. And here we want to modify every to-do, update every to-do. So we're going to set to-dos equal to to-dos.map, and we're going to generate a new to-do object for every one of these where completed is updated to the correct value. So similar to before, we're going to set this to the inverse of whatever all complete currently is. So let's see if that works. So we check this, everything is checked. Uncheck it, everything becomes unchecked. And let's check if we individually mark these all as complete. Click this and everything's unchecked. So that's working as expected. Next, let's make it so that we can delete some of these items. So we have this button here for destroy that comes up on hover. So we're just going to add a click handler here. And when this is clicked, format this. All right, so when this is clicked, we want to remove this item from our overall to-dos list. So we can use the index that we have here to do that. We're going to set to-dos equal to a new array, and we're going to pull in the to-dos through the current index, and then the to-dos after the current index. And that should be enough for us to delete. Let's see if that works. Yep, we can delete all of these. And so that looks good. While we're deleting stuff, let's implement the functionality for the clear completed. So as we're editing, this will reset. So we've got some items that we can delete. We're going to add one click down here on this button. And this is actually a pretty easy one. So to remove the completed ones, we just want to say the to-dos are now all the active ones, and we have our active to-dos up there that we defined earlier. So if I click clear completed, it is now getting rid of that completed one. Mark both of those as completed, clear completed, and we're back to empty. Let me click change here so that it refreshes. All right. These dummy to-do items have served us well, but they're really not all that useful. So let's make it so we can actually add to-dos, our own to-dos, into this to-do application. What we want to be able to do is type in this input field here and hit enter, and it should add a new to-do item into the list and also clear out this input field. So I'm going to reformat this, put these on separate lines since we're going to be adding a new event handler. So this one is we're going to do on key down. We're going to check for, so we need to receive the event. And so if and dot code equal to enter, and grab the value, and we will create a new to do out of that. So let's say new do is equal to the text, that value completed will default to false. And we'll concatenate that into our list. All right, let's see if that works. It does. Awesome. So the last major functionality we need to add is the ability to edit. So let's come down here, and so we're going to make it so that when we double click on one of these, that or double click on one of these labels, that we're going to enter editing mode. So let's on double click, and we're going to set editing to true. And we get an error because that's a const. So let's switch that over to let. All right, and now when we double click, we jump into edit mode. So the other thing that we want to do is make it so that we're automatically focusing this input field to edit. Right now, when we click, it's not automatically focused. So then we have to click again to actually get into edit. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to add a tag variable to the input here, and we're going to add an effect. And inside this effect, we'll say if we're editing, then grab that input and focus it. Let's see if that works now. Okay, so now we're focusing the input like we want. So we also need to update the value. We didn't update that before, so we'll set that to do.text. Now when we click on this, we're actually jumping in to the correct value. All right, so we want these to change. We can type stuff, and then we can either click out of that, which will fire the blur event, or we can hit enter, and that should also cause that to update. So I'm going to move these onto separate lines like I've done for a lot of the other inputs that we're adding that listeners to, just to make it a little bit more readable. I'm going to add an on blur. And inside that on blur, we're going to grab that target, this input, and its current value. That's going to be the new value of our to-do. So I'm going to actually just copy our change handler out here, and it's going to be largely the same, except now instead of updating completed, we're going to be updating text to be the value of this input. So then we set to-dos equal to the updated to-dos, and we also want to set editing back to default. So let's see if that works. Second, we'll add some extra characters, click out, and then now that's updated. So that appears to work. We want to do the same thing when we hit enter. And so I'm actually going to pull this out into a separate function. I'm going to just define a const here. Call this update to do text. And we can set that as the on blur value, and on down, we first have to do a check to see if this is enter that's being pressed. So let that code equal to enter. And we'll go ahead and call update to do text and pass along the event. All right, so to be able to do that, blur, to be able to do that, click enter. Both of those appear to be working. So we have a mostly working to-do application. We can add new things, mark some of these as completed. We can clear the completed. We can delete the remaining ones. Them all. So let's do a little bit of code organization now. Notice inside this for tag, the to-do items have gotten a little bit large, and it's making this file just a little bit hard to follow what's happening. Marko supports components, so we can pull out this into a to-do item component. So let's do that. We're going to call this to-do item. And the to-do item is going to receive some attributes, and those attributes will be the current. We will also receive an on update function and an on delete function. And so we can make those events available to our parent when they occur. So I'm going to pull out basically everything inside of here. Basically everything inside of here. And we'll pull that over into here. Let's fix our, we're going to do basically the same thing that we're doing here. We're going to modify this logic a little bit so that the to-do is just letting the parent know how it updated or requests it to delete itself. So we're actually not going to have this logic or this logic that sets the to-dos. We don't even pass in the to-dos to be able to modify them here. What we're going to do is emit up to our parent that we changed. So I'm going to go ahead and actually use this to-do item here, which is going to cause some errors initially. Going to pass the to-do. And on update. So here we're going to receive the new to-do, or let's call that the updated to-do. And then on delete, I'll have that behavior as well. All right, so in here, let's start with the delete because this one's simple. We're basically just going to move this out. The parent's going to handle this. We're just going to call on delete when the delete on the destroy button is clicked. Here, we're going to do that. And then I'm going to pull out this logic as well. It's kind of duplicated. So this is nice. We're going to remove some of that duplication. So we've got updated to-dos, and we'll set that index equal to the updated to-do passed in from this child component. And then that will update our to-do. So now we just got to come in here and make use of that. So I've got a typo here. This should actually be attributes. So on change, we're going to say this is going to fire on update. And we're just going to pass along this updated to-do. We're going to do the same thing here. We're just going to pass along this updated to-do on update. Still need to set editing to false. All right, so everything still looks to be working. We can delete, clear the completed. All right. So congratulations on building a to-do app using Marko's Tags API. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you saw how nice it was to be able to start from HTML and CSS and slowly add in these Marko tags to add functionality and interactivity. And we'll see you next time.